I still remember the exact moment everything started to fall apart, even though, at the time, I didn't recognize it as the beginning of anything. It felt small, ordinary, almost insignificant. Just a decision I made on an afternoon that looked like any other. The kind of decision you don't write down. The kind you don't announce to anyone. The kind that feels harmless. I was sitting alone in my car, parked across the street from a building I had walked into 100 times before. Same cracked sidewalk, same flickering light above the entrance. Same feeling of being slightly out of place, but not enough to turn around. I told myself I was just tired, that I needed a change, that maybe, for once, I should choose the easier option instead of the right one. I didn't know then that this single choice would quietly rearrange my entire life. At that point, things weren't perfect, but they were stable. I had routines, plans, people who expected things from me. I wasn't winning, but I wasn't losing either. And looking back now, that might have been the problem. I was comfortable enough to stop paying attention. I'd been living in that strange middle ground, where nothing is terrible, but nothing feels meaningful either. Days blurred together. Weeks passed without memory. I kept telling myself that this was what adulthood looked like: responsibility, repetition, quiet dissatisfaction. So when the opportunity appeared, it didn't look dangerous. It looked like relief. Someone offered me a shortcut. Not illegal, not immoral, just convenient. A way to move faster without waiting. A way to skip the boring steps everyone else had to take. I remember hesitating for maybe 10 seconds. Then I said yes. At first, nothing changed. That was the most deceptive part. Life didn't collapse overnight. No alarms went off. No dramatic consequences followed. In fact, things felt better. Lighter. I had more time. More freedom. I felt clever for finding a way around the system. I told myself that everyone did this in one way or another, that I was just being practical, that rules were flexible as long as no one got hurt. But what I didn't realize was that the decision had already started working on me, quietly reshaping how I thought, how I justified things, how easy it became to bend the truth. Small compromises became normal. Normal compromises became habits. Habits became who I was. Months passed. Then the cracks started to show. It began with a phone call I wasn't expecting. Nothing aggressive, just questions, polite ones. The kind that sound harmless, but feel heavy in your chest. I answered carefully, choosing my words like they were stepping stones across thin ice. When the call ended, my hands were shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying conversations in my head, wondering who knew what, and how far everything had already gone without me noticing. Every unknown number felt like a threat. Still, I convinced myself it would blow over. It didn't. Over the next few weeks, pressure built slowly but relentlessly. Meetings became tense. People looked at me differently, not accusingly, worse than that, uncertain, cautious, as if they were trying to figure out whether I was still the person they thought I was. And the truth was, I wasn't sure either. The moment everything truly collapsed didn't happen in public. It happened alone, late at night, when I opened an email that confirmed what I'd been trying not to admit. The shortcut had led nowhere. The opportunity I'd trusted disappeared overnight. The support behind it vanished. And suddenly, every risk I'd taken landed entirely on me. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling something cold spread through my chest. Not panic, not fear, clarity. I had bet everything on a decision I hadn't fully understood. And now I was going to pay for it. The consequences came fast after that. Income stopped. Relationships strained. People I thought would stand by me went quiet. Some out of disappointment. Some out of self-preservation. I don't blame them anymore. But at the time, it felt like betrayal. I started lying to others, but mostly to myself, telling myself this was temporary, that I'd fix it quickly, that I just needed one more break to turn things around. Instead, things got worse. Bills piled up. My confidence evaporated. I stopped answering messages. I avoided places where people might ask questions I couldn't answer. I became very good at disappearing. The hardest part wasn't losing money or stability. It was losing the version of myself I used to trust. Every day, I woke up with the same thought. How did I let it get this far? I wanted to rewind time, to sit back in that car across the street and choose differently, to stay uncomfortable but safe. But life doesn't rewind. It only moves forward, whether you're ready or not. One evening, after another long day of pretending everything was fine, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. The silence felt loud. My phone lay face down on the table, untouched. That's when it hit me, not as a dramatic realization, but as a quiet, exhausting truth. I couldn't fix this the way I'd broken it. The shortcut mindset that got me here couldn't get me out. And for the first time in a long while, I admitted something I'd been avoiding. I had no idea what to do next. I stayed there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of every choice I'd made pressing down at once. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even scared. I was empty. And that emptiness forced a question I had never asked myself before. If everything I built can disappear this easily, what was it really built on? I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until I tried to remember who I used to be. There was a time when I woke up with plans. Not dreams, plans. Concrete ones. I knew where I was going and why. Back then, decisions felt like steps forward, not gambles. I trusted my instincts. I believed effort mattered. That version of me felt like a stranger now. After that decision, the one that quietly unraveled everything, my days started blending together. I stopped noticing the mornings. Nights stretched longer. Sleep became shallow, filled with thoughts I couldn't turn off. Every silence felt loud. Every pause filled with regret. What hurt the most wasn't losing money or status or opportunities. It was losing the internal voice that used to guide me. The confidence that once felt natural now felt arrogant, undeserved. I questioned everything, every move, every instinct. I remember sitting alone in my car one night, engine off, staring at nothing. I had nowhere to go and no one waiting. That realization didn't come with drama, no tears, no breakdown. Just a heavy, dull acceptance. This is it, I thought. This is where bad decisions take you. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine. I still answered messages with all good. I still showed up when expected. I smiled when required. But inside, I was constantly rewinding my life, replaying moments, asking myself where exactly I crossed the line between setback and downfall. I told myself I just needed time, time to recover, time to think, time to reset. But time, when mixed with fear, doesn't heal. It erodes. Weeks passed, then months. Opportunities stopped knocking. People stopped checking in. I didn't blame them. I had become difficult to be around. Conversations felt forced. I had nothing positive to contribute. Every topic somehow reminded me of what I had lost. One afternoon, I tried to fix something small, a broken shelf. I remember thinking, if I can't fix my life, maybe I can fix this. It was a stupid thought, but it felt necessary. I grabbed tools I hadn't used in years. My hands shook slightly, not from weakness, but from disuse. The shelf collapsed. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt symbolic. Even the simplest things seemed to resist me now. I sat on the floor, surrounded by screws and wood pieces, and something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. I realized I had been waiting for motivation, waiting for clarity, waiting for a sign, and nothing was coming. That was the moment I understood something uncomfortable. I wasn't stuck because of that decision anymore. I was stuck because I kept using it as an excuse. That realization didn't empower me immediately. It scared me, because if the problem wasn't the decision, then the responsibility was mine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't try to escape that thought. I let it sit. The next few days were strange. Nothing changed externally. My situation was the same. My problems didn't disappear, but internally, something shifted. Not hope, awareness. I began noticing how much energy I spent avoiding discomfort, how I scrolled to distract myself, how I filled silence with noise, how I blamed circumstances instead of acknowledging patterns. I wasn't failing because I was unlucky. I was failing because I had stopped choosing. One morning, I forced myself out of bed earlier than usual, not because I felt inspired, but because I didn't trust my feelings anymore. I realized motivation had become unreliable. Discipline, on the other hand, didn't require belief. I made my bed. That sounds insignificant, but it wasn't. It was the first intentional act I had done in months that didn't depend on mood. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel better, but I felt present. I started doing small things without expecting them to fix my life. Walking without headphones, writing thoughts I didn't plan to show anyone, eating without distractions, sitting in silence without immediately trying to escape it. At first, it was uncomfortable. My mind resisted. Old regrets surfaced. Doubts screamed louder. But slowly, the noise changed. It stopped attacking and started explaining. I began to understand how that one decision wasn't really one decision at all. It was a culmination, a pattern of avoidance, overconfidence, and ignoring warning signs because acknowledging them would have required humility. That realization hurt more than blaming circumstances ever did. But it was honest. And honesty, I learned, has weight. With that weight came clarity. Not clarity about success or the future, but clarity about responsibility. I couldn't undo the past, but I could stop running from the present. I didn't announce any comeback. I didn't make promises to myself. I simply committed to one thing: showing up, even when it felt pointless. Some days, it did feel pointless. There were mornings when I questioned why I was trying at all. Nights when the fear returned, whispering that effort wouldn't matter, that I was already too far behind. But something surprising happened when I didn't listen. The days didn't improve dramatically, but I did. Slowly, almost invisibly. People often talk about turning points as moments of revelation. For me, it was the absence of one. No epiphany, no sudden clarity, just repetition, consistency, boring, unremarkable progress. And then, without realizing it, something unexpected happened. I was no longer afraid of remembering. The past stopped haunting me and started teaching me. I could talk about what went wrong without feeling like I was reopening a wound. I could acknowledge mistakes without defending them. I could accept responsibility without drowning in shame. That's when I knew the worst part was over. Not because my life was fixed, but because I was no longer broken by it. I started rebuilding trust with myself. I kept promises, even small ones. I followed through when no one was watching. I learned to sit with uncertainty without needing immediate reassurance. And then, one day, an opportunity appeared. Not a big one, not a dramatic one, just a chance. Old me would have ignored it or overanalyzed it. The version of me shaped by failure recognized it for what it was, a test, not of ability, but of consistency. I said yes. That decision didn't change everything, but it changed something important. It reminded me that life doesn't usually reward dramatic comebacks. It rewards quiet persistence, the kind that happens when no one is applauding. Looking back, the decision I thought ruined everything didn't destroy my life. It stripped it down. It removed illusions. It exposed weaknesses. It forced me to confront parts of myself I had been avoiding. And in doing so, it gave me something I never had before: depth, understanding, resilience that wasn't borrowed from success, but built from failure. I didn't get my old life back. I built a different one. And somehow, that made all the difference. I thought the worst was already over. Honestly, I really did. After that day when I sat alone in the car, staring at the steering wheel, not knowing if I had the strength to turn it, I imagined life would at least become neutral. Not good, not bad, just quiet. But the truth is, silence hurts too. The days that followed were strange. There were no explosions, no big dramas, just a sequence of small, invisible defeats. Waking up without motivation, eating without hunger, talking to people without really listening. I kept going to the right places, saying the right sentences, but inside it felt like something had shifted, as if I were living half an inch outside my own body. I was functioning, And that was the most dangerous part. Because when you can still function, no one notices that you're breaking. I kept up an appearance of normality. I woke up early, took showers, replied to messages, made promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Sometimes I even smiled a practiced automatic smile, the kind you learn when you don't want to explain anything to anyone. But at night, it was different. The exhaustion came heavy, not physical, but mental, a weight on my shoulders, as if every thought had to cross mud just to form. I would lie down, and sleep wouldn't come. When it did, it was light, fragile, interrupted by confusing dreams and a constant feeling that something was wrong, even without knowing exactly what. I started avoiding mirrors, not because I disliked my appearance, but because I didn't recognize the person looking back. There was something in my eyes I didn't remember seeing before. It wasn't pure sadness. It was a mix of fatigue, distrust, and a silent question that seemed to have no answer. How did I get here? I replayed every decision in my mind, every conversation, every yes that should have been a no. Every time I ignored discomfort, thinking it was just fear, just insecurity, just something in my head. The decision that changed everything hadn't been dramatic. There were no screams, no slammed doors. It was something simple, a choice that seemed logical at the time. One of those choices that, if you told someone about it, they would probably say, "That makes sense." And maybe that was the problem, because not everything that makes sense in your head makes sense in your soul. I realized that too late. Over time, I began to feel something even more frightening than pain: indifference. Some things that once mattered simply stopped mattering. Messages took days to answer. Invitations were declined without guilt. Old dreams started to feel like stories belonging to someone else. I wasn't sad all the time. Sometimes I felt empty, and emptiness is treacherous because it doesn't scream. It whispers. It convinces you that it's not worth trying, because trying requires energy, and energy is exactly what you don't have. There was one specific day, and I remember it with uncomfortable clarity, when I realized I was living on autopilot. I was sitting in a public place, surrounded by people, and it hit me that if everything around me disappeared at that moment, I wouldn't have noticed right away. It was like watching my own life from behind thick glass. That was when something began to change. Not in a beautiful way, not in an inspiring way, but in an honest way. I realized I had been waiting for something external to save me. A sign, an opportunity, a person, anything that could justify a change without me having to admit that the change had to start within me. And admitting that hurt, because it meant accepting that, despite everything that went wrong, despite the circumstances, despite the losses, I still had responsibility for the next step. Not control, responsibility. That night, for the first time in a long time, I sat with myself without distractions. No music, no phone, no noise. Just me and my thoughts, something I had been avoiding for months. At first, it was uncomfortable. My mind jumped from one topic to another, trying to escape. But little by little, things began to organize themselves. I started to see patterns. I realized how I had a habit of postponing difficult decisions, hoping they would resolve themselves. How I confused patience with avoidance. How I called being strong what was really just enduring in silence. I saw how many times I chose the path that felt safest for others, not for me. How many times I silenced my intuition because it didn't have enough proof. And it was there that a simple, almost obvious truth hit me. It wasn't one decision that ruined everything. It was a sequence of small concessions. And in the same way, it wouldn't be one big turning point that fixed everything. It would be small adjustments, small commitments, small, different choices. Nothing glamorous, nothing cinematic, but real. The next day, I did something that may seem insignificant to someone watching from the outside, but for me, was huge. I said no. A simple, polite no, without long explanations. And the world didn't end. No one got angry. No one abandoned me. Nothing collapsed. What fell was only the illusion that I needed to please all the time to deserve space. That no made room for another, and then another. Little by little, I began to rebuild something inside me that I didn't even know was broken. Self-respect. Not the inflated, noisy kind of respect, but a quiet, steady respect that appears when you stop betraying yourself in small ways. There were still difficult days, many of them. Days when I wanted to go back, pretend nothing had happened, return to the familiar comfort of autopilot. But now I recognized that impulse, and recognizing it was already half the battle. With time, I began to notice small external changes reflecting the internal ones. Conversations became more honest, decisions clearer, anxiety less constant. Not because everything was resolved, but because I was present. I stopped waiting for everything to make sense before acting. I learned that clarity often comes after movement, not before. And maybe the greatest lesson was this. Not everything that collapses is failing. Some things are making space. Today, when I look back, that decision I once thought had ruined everything, I see it differently. It wasn't the end. It was the point where I finally stopped running from myself. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And sometimes, that's all we need to begin again.